My mom tore up my medical records and screamed, "You're letting your sister die." My dad called me a selfish mistake. They dragged me to donate half my liver. Then the doctor said 6 words, and Mom collapsed in her chair. The plastic chair in the hospital corridor creaked under my weight as I leaned over to Ivy. She was sitting with her head down, her hands clutching a paper cup of water with trembling hands. 20 years old, but she looked 35, yellowish skin, puffy eyes, dull hair. "Cirrhosis," she repeated quietly, the doctor's words still echoing in the air. "Scarlet, I don't drink that much." I didn't say anything. I knew the truth. I'd seen empty beer bottles in her room more than once, smelled the alcohol in the mornings when she thought no one would notice. But Ivy had always been able to hide her problems from her parents. And I always kept quiet about what I saw. The office door opened and Dr. Miller came out with a thick file in his hands. He was a tall man in his 50s, with graying temples and a serious look through his glasses. He was followed by my mom and dad, my mom's face red with tears. My dad clenched his jaw so tightly that his yolks were protruding. "Please, have a seat," the doctor said, pointing to the chairs opposite Ivy and me. My mother immediately rushed to her youngest daughter, hugging her as tightly as if she wanted to protect her from the world. I knew this scene. It had always been like this since I was a kid. When Ivy broke a window in 6th grade while playing with a ball at school, my mother went to argue with the principal, claiming that it was the hooligans' fault. When Ivy was 18 and had a drunken car accident, my dad paid all the fines and arranged with the local police to have the case dropped. And when I got a C in math in 10th grade, my mom didn't talk to me for a week, telling everyone she was ashamed of her daughter. "Your daughter's condition is very serious," Dr. Miller began, opening the file. "But she's so young," her mother whispered, stroking Ivy's hair. "The liver can recover on its own, right, doctor?" The doctor shook his head, looking sad. "Unfortunately, no. The damage is too severe. The only chance to save her life is a liver transplant. Without it, your daughter has 3, maybe 4 months to live." The silence was broken by the mother's piercing cry. She held Ivy so tightly that my sister almost suffocated. Dad grabbed his head with both hands, his broad shoulders trembling with restrained tears. I sat motionless, watching this scene as if it were a theater performance. For some reason, I suddenly remembered my 17 years of age, when I was in this very hospital with appendicitis. My mom came to visit me only once, brought me a bag of oranges and said that Ivy had an English test tomorrow, so she couldn't sit with me for long. Dad didn't show up at all, saying that he had a lot of work to do at work, that the hardware stores couldn't operate without him. "What should we do?" Dad asked, raising his head and wiping his eyes with his shirt sleeve. "Where can we find a donor?" "First, we will immediately put your daughter on the waiting list for an organ donor," the doctor explained in a calm, professional tone. "But the wait can last for many months, and as you know, we have very little time. The best option is a family donor. One of the close relatives can give a part of their healthy liver," and then my mom turned her head sharply to me. Dad also looked in my direction with his cold gray eyes. Even Ivy looked up for the first time since we had been sitting in that hallway. "Scarlett," Mom said in the tone of voice she used to order me to clean my room or wash a mountain of dishes after a family dinner. "You're her sister." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact that could not be questioned. I am Ivy's sister, so I have to help her, just as I had always helped her throughout my life. I remembered how Ivy and I used to share sweets when we were kids. My mom would always give her most of the chocolate or more candy, and she would say to me in familiar words, "You're older, you're smarter, you have to give in to your little sister." When Ivy wanted to play with my favorite doll, my mom was always on her side. "Give it to your sister, she's smaller than you." But when I asked her to give me some of Ivy's things, my mom would sternly reply, "Don't touch her toys, she's in a bad mood today." When Ivy was 13, she accidentally broke my most precious cup, the last gift I received from my grandmother before she died. My mom said, "Why are you crying? It was an accident. Don't cry. We'll buy you a new one." A new cup was never bought, and when I accidentally ruined Ivy's expensive lipstick a month later, my mother made me give her all my pocket money for the whole month to buy a new one. On her 15th birthday, Ivy received a brand new smartphone of the latest model as a gift. On my birthday the same year, I received a sweater knitted by my mother. Handmade things are always more valuable than store-bought things, she explained when she noticed my disappointment. And at the age of 18, Ivy was bought a used but nice car for her college commute. When I asked about a car for myself, my mom coldly replied, "If you want a car, you can earn it yourself." And so I did. I worked every weekend and summer vacation as a barista at Sunshine Dreams near the local university, where I now work full-time after graduation. "How long does it take to prepare for the operation?" my dad asked the doctor, but he kept looking directly at me with his heavy gaze. "First, we need to conduct a full comprehensive examination of the potential donor to make sure that he is suitable for all medical indicators," Dr. Miller explained. "Then, if all the tests are positive, we can schedule the surgery." "What are the risks for the donor?" I asked in a low voice, trying not to look my family in the eye. All three of them turned to me at the same time, looking as if I had just said something completely unacceptable and selfish. "What risks?" my mother asked sharply, her voice sounding really indignant. "Are you seriously afraid to help your own sister?" "I'm just asking about the medical risks for myself," I repeated a little louder and more confidently. Dr. Miller nodded his head in understanding. "Of course, this is a perfectly normal question. There are risks for the donor. It is a serious surgery. Possible complications include bleeding, infection, problems with healing of the surgical wound. In about 5% of cases, serious complications occur that require additional treatment. But the mortality rate among donors is very low, less than 1% of all surgeries." "You see?" My mother spoke to me in a tone that is used to talk to a small child. "You are a young and healthy girl, and your sister might just die without your help." I looked at Ivy for a long time. She had been silent all this time, but her big blue eyes spoke for her better than any words. "You owe me this. For all these years when I was the favorite of the family, and you stayed in the shadows, now you owe me your health." "I need time to think about it," I said, trying to speak calmly. The silence in the corridor became so thick and heavy that it seemed like it could be cut with an ordinary knife. "Think about it?" My mother's voice rose a whole octave higher in anger. "Think about what? Your own sister is lying here dying." "Scarlett," Dad said quietly, but very coldly, "this is not the time or place for selfishness." Selfishness. I have heard this word all my life. I was called selfish every time I dared to want something for myself. When I asked to buy me a dress as beautiful as Ivy's. When I wanted to go to a school party instead of staying home and taking care of my younger sister. "I'm not saying no," I said, as carefully as I could. "I'm just saying I need time to think about it." Ivy finally spoke in her weak, barely audible voice. "How much time do you need to think about it while I'm slowly dying here?" Her voice had that familiar note that always appeared when she wanted to get her way. When she begged her parents to buy her something extremely expensive. When she was trying to avoid a well-deserved punishment for her pranks. I slowly stood up from the plastic chair. "See you tomorrow morning," I said briefly, and started walking towards the hospital exit, not looking back at my family. It was quite noisy in the corridor. Nurses were talking on the phones, a small child was crying somewhere in the far ward, and an old TV was quietly working in the waiting room. But in my head, there was absolute silence. I walked down the long corridor and thought that tomorrow morning I would have to give the final answer that would change my life forever. "Scarlett," I heard my mother's familiar, sharp voice behind me. "Come back here this instant." But I continued to walk confidently forward without looking back. For the first time in my life, I didn't stop and turn around to hear my mother's angry shout. The next morning I woke up to the sound of the door slamming. My mother burst into my room without knocking, as she always did when she wanted to show her irritation. She was holding a cup of coffee and looked like she hadn't slept all night. "Do you really think you can just hide here and hope that everything will go away?" she began without greeting me. I sat up on the bed, rubbing my eyes. The clock read 7:30 in the morning. I had to go to work at 8, but my mother seemed to have decided to start the conversation as early as possible. "Mom, I said I'd think about it." "Think about it?" she interrupted. "What is there to think about? Your sister is dying, Scarlett. She's dying, and you're thinking." She set the cup on my bedside table with such a thud that the coffee splashed onto the wooden surface. Linda, don't yell at the girl in the morning. I automatically reached out for napkins, out of habit. But when he appeared in the doorway, his face didn't show any sympathy for me. Although Scarlett really needs to understand the seriousness of the situation. Dad was dressed in a work-suit gray pants and a navy blue shirt with the Campbell Building Services logo on it. His hair was neatly combed as always. Even in this situation, he looked like a man in control of everything around him. Perhaps, except for the lives of his daughters. My mom and I stayed up all night discussing the situation, he continued, and we realized that you need more information to make the right decision. The right decision, not your decision or a decision you can live with. The right decision. We called Dr. Miller, my mom said, sitting on the edge of my bed, and he said the whole family should be tested. But Scarlett, you realize there's really only one option. Why? I asked. Dad looked at me as if I had asked a stupid question. Because you are young and healthy. I am 51 years old, I have high blood pressure and back problems. Your mom is 46, a teacher, constantly stressed, and takes migraine pills. And you are 23 years old, never seriously ill, don't drink, don't smoke. Speaking of smoking, Mom interjected, the doctor said that smokers can't be donors. And who smoked in the gym at school? Who? She looked at me with triumph, as if she had just won an argument. Mom, I smoked for 3 months in the 9th grade. That was 5 years ago. It doesn't matter. It shows that you knew how to hide things from us. Just like Ivy was able to hide. She didn't finish her sentence, but we all understood. Just like Ivy hid her drinking. Where is she anyway? I asked. She's sleeping, Dad answered. The doctor prescribed her some tranquilizers after yesterday. She's very worried about your reaction. Of course she is. Ivy is worried about my reaction to being asked to donate a part of my body, not because she's been hiding her addiction from us for years. It's not because she put herself in this state. You have to understand, my mother took my hand, that this is not just an operation. This is a chance to save your sister's life, and my risks. What risks? Mom let go of my hand. You're young, it will heal. The doctor said there are risks. Minimal, Dad interrupted. Less than 1%, and Ivy has no chance at all without the surgery. I got out of bed and went to the window. It was gray outside, a typical Nebraska fall. My neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, was taking her old Labrador for a walk. An ordinary morning in an ordinary neighborhood. And I was discussing with my parents whether to give half of my liver to my sister. How long will it take to recover? I asked, without turning around. The doctor said 2 to 6 months, my mom answered. But you're young, it will be faster. And work? Work? Dad raised his voice. You think about work when your sister is dying? Is working at the coffee shop more important than Ivy's life? I turned to them. Dad, I have to pay my share of the rent, my food, my car insurance. I can't do that without a job. We'll help you with the money for now, Mom said, sounding like she was doing me a huge favor. The most important thing right now is to save Ivy, temporarily. Just like when they temporarily took $500 from me to repair Ivy's car. I never saw the money. What if I'm not a good match as a donor? You will be, Dad said confidently. You and Ivy are sisters. You have the same blood type, similar genetic characteristics. Ivy appeared in the doorway. Her hair was disheveled, and she had pillow marks on her face. But even so, she looked beautiful. She always looked prettier than me, higher cheekbones, bigger eyes, longer hair. Even her illness did not spoil her appearance, only added to its tragedy. I heard voices, she said quietly. Are you fighting because of me? Her mother immediately got up and hugged her. No, darling, we're just going over the details. Is Scarlett willing to help? Ivy looked at me over her mother's shoulder. We're still talking, I replied. Talking? Ivy's voice rose. I could be dead in a few months and you're talking? Tears began to flow down her cheeks. Big, beautiful tears, like in the movies. I've never been able to cry like that. My eyes always turned red and my nose swelled. Ivy, I began. I want to understand all the risks. Risks? She pulled away from my mother. Of course you're scared, but There's no buts, she screamed. I'm your sister. You have to save me. I have to. There's that word again. I have to give in. I have to help. I have to understand. I have to forgive. Scarlett, Dad interrupted. We have to go for a checkup. We have to go today. Dr. Miller can see us at 2 o'clock. I have to work until 4. Call in sick, Mom said. We have inventory today, and they're expecting me. Ivy started crying again. You're putting a coffee shop ahead of my life? Is it? I looked at her, and suddenly something clicked in my head. Something in her posture, in her expression, seemed familiar. This is how she looked when she wanted something from her parents, when she asked for money for new clothes or permission to go to a party. Even now, in such a terrible situation, she was playing. Okay, I said. I'll go for a checkup. But first, I want to talk to Ivy alone. My parents looked at each other. Why? My mom asked. I just want to. We can talk later, Ivy said quickly. After the exam. Number, we need to talk now. Mom and Dad reluctantly left the room. I waited for their footsteps to stop on the stairs and looked at my sister. How long have you known? About what? About the liver, that you were sick. Ivy looked away. I don't know what you're talking about. Ivy, don't lie. You didn't just fall asleep and wake up with stage 3 cirrhosis. It takes years to develop. She sat down on my chair, wrapping her arms around her knees. A year ago, my right side started hurting. I was turning yellow. The doctor at the college said I should get checked out, but you didn't want your parents to know about your drinking. It's not drinking, she flashed. I just drink sometimes, like all students do. Ivy, the bottles are empty. Not from one party. You were spying on me? I was cleaning the house, like I always do. And I saw what you were hiding. She fell silent, staring at the floor. I thought I could quit, she finally said. I thought it would go away, and when I realized it wouldn't, it was too late. Why didn't you tell me? Ivy looked up at me, and I saw something new in her eyes. Not regret, not shame, anger. Why? So you could go and tell your parents right away? So that they could control me even more? I wouldn't. Really? She stood up. You've always tried to look like the perfect daughter, always fulfilling all their demands, hoping they would finally notice you. Do you think I haven't seen how jealous you are of me? The words hit me like a slap in the face. I'm not jealous. You are. I've always been jealous, because I am loved more, because I'm more trusted, because I'm more important. Ivy. And now you have a chance to prove that you are important too, that you can do something important too. She came closer, and I saw the same cold calculation in her eyes that I had seen in my mom's yesterday at the hospital. Just don't think you have a choice, she said quietly, because if you refuse and I die, my parents will never forgive you, and I will never forgive you either. She left the room, leaving me alone with the realization that my little sister had just blackmailed me, with my own life and my parents' love. I sat down on the bed and looked at my hands. The usual hands of a 23-year-old girl who works as a barista and lives with her parents. In a few hours, the doctor will take my blood for analysis and determine whether I can save the life of my sister, who hates me. And for the first time I thought, do I want to save it? The week of waiting for the results turned out to be the longest in my life. Every morning I woke up thinking that today I might get a call that would change everything. At work, I was absent-mindedly making coffee, mixing up orders, and breaking cups twice. My manager Brandon asked if I was okay, but I just said I hadn't slept well. At home, the atmosphere was tense, like the strings of a guitar before it broke. My mom spoke to me in an emphatically polite manner, but I could hear the threat in her voice. Dad hardly spoke, just gave me meaningful looks. Ivy played the role of a dying martyr, lying on the couch, watching TV shows, and sighing softly so that everyone could hear how bad she was feeling. On Tuesday morning, the call finally came. I was standing at the coffee machine, making a latte for a regular customer when the phone rang. Scarlett Campbell? The woman's voice was formal and polite. Your results are ready. You can pick them up after 12 today. My hands shook as I turned off the phone. The latte turned out terribly, the milk curdled, and the pattern on the foam resembled a blot. The client, a pensioner named Mr. Davis, looked at the coffee and shook his head in sympathy. "Rough day, dear?" "Yes," I said, pouring out the coffee and starting to make a new one. At 12, I took off work and went to the lab. The building was modern, glass, with a large logo and the slogan, "Your health is our mission." It smelled of disinfection and air conditioning inside. "Campbell," I told the receptionist, "I need your test results." The woman looked at the computer, printed something, and handed me a sealed envelope. "If you have any questions, please contact your doctor." I got into the car but did not dare to open the envelope. I sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes, looking at the white paper with my name on it. Finally, I broke the seal. The first page was full of incomprehensible words and numbers. ALT, AST, bilirubin, albumin, names that told me nothing. But on the second page, there was a conclusion in simple language. Moderate increase in liver function tests. Consultation with a hepatologist is recommended. My heart sank to my heels. A moderate increase. Is it bad? Does it mean I can't be a donor? Or is it not so critical? I Googled a few terms on my phone, but the medical information only confused me more. Some sites said that elevated levels were normal after viral infections. Others warned of serious liver disease. I drove home slowly, trying to delay the moment of truth. But when I got home, the whole family was already waiting in the living room. My mom was sitting on the edge of the couch. My dad was standing by the window. Ivy was lying under the blanket, but her eyes were riveted on me. "Well?" my mom asked, not waiting for me to take off my jacket. I took out an envelope and handed it to her. Mom grabbed the papers and started reading, moving her lips. Dad came over and looked over her shoulder. "What does this mean?" Mom asked. "These numbers, these dates?" "It says I have liver problems," I said quietly. "What kind of problems?" Ivy sat up on the couch. "They recommend a consultation with a specialist." Silence filled the room. Mom reread the papers, as if hoping the words would change. Dad pulled his reading glasses out of his pocket and studied the results carefully, too. "It doesn't mean you can't be a donor," he finally said. "Moderate is not critical." "But I may not recover well from the operation," I objected. "If I already have problems with my liver, it will be even worse with half an organ." "Don't make up stuff," my mother said sharply. "You're not a doctor to diagnose yourself." "I don't diagnose. You're reading numbers you don't understand," Dad interjected. "You need to go to a doctor and find out what they really mean." Ivy got up from the couch and came over to me. She looked even weaker than she had a week ago. Her skin was yellow and there were dark circles under her eyes. "Scarlet," she said softly. "Maybe it was just a lab error. Or were you sick when you took the test?" I remembered that day. I felt fine. I didn't even sneeze. No, I was fine. "Then it could be stress," Ivy continued, "from worrying about me. Stress affects all your organs." Mom nodded. "That's right. You were so worried about me that your metabolism was out of whack." I looked at them and couldn't believe it. They tried to explain my tests as stress because Ivy was sick. Not the stress of being asked to donate half my liver. Not the stress of being blackmailed. It was because I was worried about my sister. "Where are your results?" I asked. My parents looked at each other. "Ours aren't ready yet," my mom said. "They told us to come back tomorrow." "Why are mine ready sooner?" "Maybe because you're younger," my dad suggested. It sounded crazy, but I didn't argue. "I'm going to call the doctor," I said, and went to the kitchen. Dr. Miller took my call through his secretary and explained the situation. "Your numbers are indeed elevated, but not critically so," he said. "This could be due to a variety of factors, from poor diet to an underlying infection. It would be best to repeat the tests in a week. And if the numbers don't improve, we'll do additional tests. An ultrasound, possibly a biopsy." "Doctor," I mustered up the courage to ask the most important thing. "Can I be a donor with such results?" He was silent. "This is a difficult question. Technically, you can, but the risks for you will be higher. Recovery may take longer. What kind of complications?" Liver failure, clotting problems, infections. Scarlett, I can't tell you what to do. It's your decision. But if you were my daughter, I would advise you to wait for more results. When I came back to the living room, the whole family was looking at me hopefully. What did the doctor say? My mom asked. He said the numbers are elevated, but not critical. You see, my mom said triumphantly, I told you you were healthy, it's just stress. But he also said that the risks for me would be higher, I added. What risks? Dad asked. Liver failure, blood problems, infections. Ivy sat down on the arm of the chair where Dad was sitting. What are my risks if I don't get a liver? She asked quietly. 100% death. Ivy, no, Scarlett. Let's be honest. You have a small risk of complications. Mine is certain death. Which is worse. I didn't know what to say. On the rational side, she was right, but something inside me was protesting. What if I'm not the donor? I asked. When will you get your results? Tomorrow, Dad answered. But Scarlett, be realistic. I'm 51 years old. I have type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, and I take a lot of medication. Do you think my results will be better than yours? And Mom? Mom looked away. I also have health problems. What kind of problems? My liver, she said quietly. Ever since I was young, I was taking pills for depression, and they gave me complications. Why didn't you tell me before? Why bother you? I'm managing. Managing? You have liver problems and you still want to be a donor? I want to save my daughter, said the mother, raising her voice. And you are looking for reasons to refuse. I am not looking for reasons. I have real health problems? Moderate problems, Dad shouted. Moderate! Ivy's are critical. I looked at them. At my mom with her hidden liver problems, at my dad with his diabetes and blood pressure, at Ivy with her terminal illness. And I realized that I was really the only option. Not because I am the healthiest. Besides, Dad added, I drink on weekends. A couple of beers at a barbecue with friends. The doctor said that donors shouldn't abuse alcohol. You don't abuse it, I argued. You drink moderately. Anyway, he waved his hand. The combination of diabetes and alcohol is a risk. That leaves you. That leaves me. The younger daughter who always gave in, always sacrificed, always put the needs of others before her own. I'm scared, I admitted. Ivy came over and took my hands. I'm scared too, she said. Imagine how scared I am to die at 20. But what if something happens to me during the operation? Nothing will happen, my mother said confidently. Your liver will recover and Ivy will live. And if not, then at least you tried, said Dad. You tried to save your sister. Can you live with yourself for not trying? There it is. The final argument. The guilt that would haunt me for the rest of my life if Ivy died and I refused to help. I looked at their faces, at my mom's teary eyes, at my dad's clenched jaw, at Ivy's weak smile. They were all waiting for my answer. They all knew I had no choice. Okay, I said quietly. After the repeated tests, if the doctor says it's okay, I'll do it. My mom threw her arms around me, Ivy cried with relief, and my dad nodded his approval. And I stood in the middle of this joy and felt as if I had just signed my own death warrant. But the worst part was that part of me was relieved. Finally, the decision was made. Finally, I could stop fighting and just give up. Like I always do. I took repeated tests on Friday morning, and the results were promised on Monday. The weekend was spent in tense anticipation. My mom was constantly cleaning the house, as if cleanliness could affect my results. Dad was watching the news all the time, but I could see that he wasn't absorbing a word of it. Ivy was lying in bed and hardly ate. She said she was sick. On Monday at 10 in the morning, we all came to the hospital as a family. I took the day off work, telling Brandon that I had an urgent medical examination. He didn't ask for details. He had noticed that I hadn't been myself in recent weeks. Dr. Miller's office looked the same as it did weeks ago, but the atmosphere was different. We were all sitting on the edge of our chairs, ready for a crucial conversation. On the doctor's desk were 4 folders containing our test results. So, Dr. Miller began, putting on his glasses, I've reviewed all of your results. Scarlett, your repeat tests showed a slight improvement, but your numbers are still slightly elevated. My heart beat faster. Is a slight improvement good or bad? What does that mean? My mom asked before I could open my mouth. It means that Scarlett's liver function is not perfect, the doctor explained. It's not great, but I think she'll be fine. We can consider her as a potential donor, although the risks will be somewhat higher than standard. Mom immediately moved to the edge of the chair. Then let's schedule the surgery, she said enthusiastically. When can we do it? Tomorrow? Next week? Dr. Miller held up a hand to stop her. Wait a minute. I want to see the results of the rest of the family first. Why? Mom blinked in surprise. A young body will be better than us older ones. Not always, the doctor replied calmly. Sometimes a 40-year-old with a good lifestyle can be a better donor than a 20-year-old with hidden problems. He held out his hand. Let me see your results. My mother reluctantly reached into her purse and pulled out 2 envelopes. But we don't want to be donors, she said quickly. We have a lot of health problems. Let me determine that for myself, the doctor said, and took the first envelope. He opened the papers and began to read, furrowing his brow from time to time. The doctor muttered. Type 2 diabetes, hypertension, high cholesterol, signs of fatty liver, plus regular alcohol consumption, even in moderation. He looked at Dad. I'm sorry, Mr. Campbell, but you're not a suitable donor. I told you, Dad grumbled, but I could hear the relief in his voice. Now your results, Mrs. Campbell. The doctor held out his hand for the second envelope. Mom held it in her hands for a few seconds longer than necessary. Doctor, I really have a lot of problems. I'm taking antidepressants, I have migraines, hormonal problems. Let me see, the doctor insisted. Mom handed over the envelope as reluctantly as if it contained a state secret. Dr. Miller opened it and began to read. His eyebrows rose in surprise. Ooh, he said, reading something twice. You have excellent vitals. Silence filled the office. Mom stood there with her mouth open. Dad turned to her with a puzzled expression. Ivy looked confused. What do you mean? Mom asked quietly. Dr. Miller looked at her over the top of his glasses. Your liver is in perfect condition. All the vitals are normal, even better than average for your age. The function is excellent. The structure is without pathology. He paused and said 6 words that changed everything. It would be better for the mother to be a donor for the daughter. My mother turned so pale that I thought she was going to faint. She looked at the doctor, then at her results, then back at the doctor as if he were speaking Chinese. But she blurted out, I have migraines, antidepressants. Migraines do not affect liver function, the doctor explained, and the antidepressants you are taking are not toxic to the liver. Moreover, according to the tests, you lead a healthy lifestyle. You don't drink alcohol, you eat right, you do sports. Yoga, my mother answered automatically, twice a week. Excellent. Your liver is in much better condition than Scarlett's. My mother abruptly sank into her chair, as if her legs would not hold her up. Her face was waxy, her eyes wide with shock. Mom? Ivy asked quietly. Mom was silent, looking at the floor. There was a tense silence in the office. Finally, she looked up and looked at the doctor. Let's think about it, she said in a hoarse voice. Why? I exclaimed, unable to contain myself. Your results are perfect, and you've been convincing me for weeks that I should help my sister. Mom turned to me sharply. Shut up, she said through gritted teeth. Don't you dare talk to me like that. But why did I have to go through with the surgery with the risks, and you don't want to with perfect results? Because it's different, Mom raised her voice. I'm a mother. I have a responsibility. And I don't? I also started to yell. I don't have a life, plans, dreams. Dr. Miller stood up from his chair. Maybe you should talk quietly at home. Yes, my mom said quickly, grabbing her purse. We need to talk about this. Thank you, doctor. She stood up and started to walk out. Dad followed her silently. Ivy stood up slowly, still looking confused. Scarlett? She said quietly. Scarlett, my mother called out sharply from the door. Come here now. I got up and followed them, but my head was buzzing. Mom's results were perfect. Perfect. Better than mine. And all these weeks she had been convincing me that she had health problems. The car was in a depressing silence. Mom sat in the front seat and looked out the window. Dad drove the car with his jaw clenched. Ivy was holding my hand, but I could feel it trembling. Mom, Ivy finally said, maybe this is a sign? That you have to help me? Don't be silly, my mother replied sharply. It's a coincidence. A coincidence? I couldn't keep quiet. You've been trying to convince me for weeks to donate my liver, and when it turns out you're the best candidate, it's a coincidence? I'm your mother. My mother turned to me. I gave birth to you, raised you, spent the best years of my life on you. I can't risk myself. And I can. You're young. You have your whole life ahead of you. You'll recover, won't you? You're in perfect health. I have a responsibility. I have a job. I'm a teacher. The kids depend on me. And I don't work? I have no responsibility? Dad stopped the car at a traffic light and turned to us. Enough, he shouted. Stop fighting. We will discuss everything calmly at home. But when we got home, there was no calm conversation. Mom immediately went to her room and locked herself in. I followed her and knocked on the door. Mom, open up. Leave me alone. Mom, let's talk. There's nothing to talk about. I tried to turn the knob, but the door was locked. Mom, I knocked louder. Open the door. What's going on here? Dad came. Mom locked herself in and won't talk. Dad knocked on the door. Linda, come out. We need to work this out. I've already decided, I heard a muffled voice. I'm not going to be a donor. Why? I screamed. Why don't you want to save your own daughter? The door opened sharply. My mom stood there with teary eyes and a red face. Because I'm afraid, she screamed. I'm afraid of the surgery. I'm afraid of the pain. I'm afraid of dying. Are you satisfied? But you told me that the risks are minimal. For you, they are minimal. You're young, and the doctor said the risks are even lower for you. Your vitals are perfect. Mom was silent, breathing heavily. Mom, Ivy said quietly, appearing in the hallway. Mom, I'm dying. Don't say that. Mom rushed to her side. We'll find another donor. What other donor? I asked. The doctor said the wait could be months. Ivy doesn't have months. We'll find a private option, said Dad. We'll pay for it. We'll get a loan. We'll sell the house. I looked at them and couldn't believe it. They were willing to sell the house to find an outside donor, but they weren't willing to risk my mom's health, which was perfect. What if you don't find a donor in time? I asked. Then Ivy will die, I continued, and you will know for the rest of your life that you could have saved her, but you didn't. Shut up, Mom yelled. Shut up! You don't understand. You're not a mother. You don't know what it's like to risk your life. Do you know what it's like to watch your daughter die when you could have saved her? Mom cried and ran back into the room, closing the door again. Dad looked at me reproachfully. Why are you torturing her? I'm not. I'm telling the truth. I'm telling... Ivy came to me. She looked even weaker than she had in the morning. Scarlett, she said quietly, maybe you'll be a donor after all. The doctor said your results are good. I looked at her long and hard. Why don't you demand it from your mom? I asked. Why don't you yell at her like you yelled at me? Ivy looked away. Because we all need our moms, and you... She didn't finish, but I didn't need an explanation. I didn't. No one needs me. I could die during surgery, and it would be sad, but not critical. My mom is needed. She is a mother, a teacher, a wife, and I am just a daughter who has to give a part of herself and be grateful for the opportunity to save someone. I went to my room and sat on the bed, looking at the ceiling. Behind the wall, I could hear my mom crying. My father's voice came from the kitchen. He was on the phone, probably looking for private clinics. And I was lying there thinking about the doctor's 6 words that changed everything. It's better for the mother to be a donor for her daughter. For the first time in my life, I saw the real face of my family. And this face was I moved away from my parents a week after the doctor's visit. I just packed my things in 2 backpacks and left. My mom screamed that I was selfish and that I was leaving the family at the most difficult moment. Dad said I would regret this decision. Ivy cried and begged me to stay. but I knew that if I didn't leave now, I would never leave. For the first month, I lived in a cheap hotel on the outskirts of the city, where they charged $30 a night. The room was tiny, with a squeaky bed and a shower that would give me hot water or ice cold, but it was my space. For the first time in my life, I fell asleep without hearing my mom's remarks through the wall or Ivy's complaints about life. I had to quit my job at the coffee shop. Brandon said he couldn't keep someone who just disappeared for a week without warning. I didn't explain why. How can you explain that you ran away from a family that wanted to use you as a spare part? I was running out of money quickly. I had a little over $1,000 in savings, all I could accumulate over the years of working at minimum wage. I had to find both a job and a place to live. I found an apartment through an ad on Craigslist, a one-room studio in an old house on Dubovy Street. The rent was $650 a month, which was the limit of my means. The landlord, an elderly man named Mr. Chen, looked at me skeptically. "You're very young," he said with an accent. "Do you have a job?" "I'm looking," I answered honestly. He nodded and handed me the keys. A deposit and the first month's rent in advance. If there are any problems, I'll evict you right away. The apartment was minimalist to the extreme: a folding bed, a small table, a two-burner stove, and a refrigerator the size of a nightstand. But when I closed the door behind me and found myself in complete silence, I felt so relieved that I cried. The next day, I started looking for a job. I went to all the coffee shops in the neighborhood, 2 supermarkets, and even a dry cleaner. Everyone asked for work experience in their field or recommendations. I had both, but only from the coffee shop I was fired from. On the 4th day of my search, I saw an ad on a board near the Happy Paws Veterinary Clinic. Assistant administrator required. Experience with animals is welcome, but not required. I hesitated at the entrance. I've always dreamed of working with animals. I wanted to become a veterinarian at school, but my mom said it was an unrealistic profession for a girl from our family. My dad added that it costs too much to study and there is not enough work. They convinced me to take an accounting course, stable and practical. The clinic inside smelled of disinfection and something soft and cozy. A woman in her 40s with curly hair and kind eyes sat at the reception desk. She was talking on the phone to someone about vaccinating a puppy. "Can I help you?" she asked, hanging up the phone. "It's about a job for an administrative assistant." "Oh, great. I'm Carrie, the clinic manager." She held out her hand. "And what's your name?" "Scarlett Campbell." "That's a beautiful name. Do you have any experience with animals?" I thought about all the stray cats I'd fed outside the coffee shop despite Brandon's forbidding. How I dreamed of getting a dog, but my mom said it was dirty and expensive. "I'm not a professional, but I love animals very much. That's the most important thing. The rest can be learned. Dr. Williams is with a patient right now, but he'd like to talk to you. Can you wait?" I sat down on a soft chair in the waiting area. There were people sitting around with animals: a woman with a red cat in a carrier, a teenager with a small rabbit, an elderly man with an old Labrador who was breathing heavily. Everyone looked worried, but not panicked. They seemed to trust this place. 20 minutes later, a man in a white coat appeared, tall, thin, with kind eyes behind glasses. "Are you Scarlett?" "I'm Dr. Williams. Let's go to my office." The office was small but cozy. On the walls were pictures of animals, obviously the patients he treated. On the desk was a photo of a woman with 2 children. "Tell me about yourself," he asked, sitting down across from me. I told him about my job at the coffee shop, that I had always loved animals, that I was looking for a stable job. "Why a veterinary clinic?" he asked. "Honestly, I've always wanted to work with animals, but I was told it was unrealistic. Now I decided to try what I really want." He smiled. "I see. There's a lot of work to do, taking calls, making appointments, filling out cards, sometimes helping with animals during procedures. The salary is modest, $9 an hour to start, but after 3 months we raise it to 11. The schedule is from 9 to 6, 5 days a week. Does that sound good to you?" $9 an hour was more than I'd make at a coffee shop, even without a tip. "It's fine," I said. Then start on Monday. Carrie will show you everything you need to know. When I left the clinic, my heart was light for the first time in months. I have a job I like, the job I dreamed of, but didn't even dare to say out loud. The first days were difficult. I had to memorize the names of all the animals that came regularly, learn how to fill out medical records, and understand the schedule of appointments. But I picked up everything on the fly. The animals didn't scare me. Even the big, aggressive dogs calmed down when I talked to them. You have a talent, Carrie said at the end of the first week. The animals can feel you. After a month at the clinic, I finally went to the doctor about my liver problems. Dr. Patel, the hepatologist my general practitioner had referred me to, was a young man of Indian descent, with a soft voice and a professional approach. Your vitals indicate chronic hepatitis, he explained after reviewing the results. It's nothing to worry about if you start treatment on time. How long will it take? 6 months to a year. Medication, diet, regular examinations. The prognosis is good. Why did I get it? I don't drink, I don't take drugs. Sometimes a single contact with infected blood is enough. A tattoo in a dubious parlor, the negligence of medical staff, even cuts on the same instrument. Or simply weak immunity during a stressful period. A stressful period. I thought about the years of living with my family, the constant tension, the fact that I always had to suppress my needs for the sake of others. I started treatment right away, pills twice a day, a diet without fatty and spicy foods, and a complete rejection of alcohol. I easily complied with all the requirements. I was finally doing something for my own health, not someone else's. 2 months after my move, I received an SMS from Ivy. They found a donor. The operation will be next week. Mom cries every day because of you. I looked at the message for a long time. I felt relieved that Ivy would be saved, but no guilt that it would not be me. No desire to go back and support the family. I replied, I'm happy for you. I wish you a successful surgery. She didn't write anymore. The surgery seemed to be successful, because a week later I received a call from my mom. Scarlett? She sounded tired but hostile. A donor was found through a private clinic. It cost $50,000. Good thing they found it. Good? We sold the house. We're moving into a small apartment. Because of you. Not because of me. Because you refused to be a donor when you had perfect results. I'm a mother. I can't risk it. Could I? She was silent. When are you coming home? Ivy needs support in rehab. I'm not coming back. Don't be silly. Where are you living? In some kind of a hostel? Come back. We'll forget everything. Mom, I'm not going back. I have a life here, a job, an apartment. What job? You don't have a degree. I work in a veterinary clinic. With animals? She laughed bitterly. I told you it was unrealistic. You won't last long. I will. Scarlett, Scarlett, you're our daughter. You belong here, with your family. You only need me as a free servant. How can you say that? Easy, because it's the truth. She hung up the phone. The next day, my dad called, asking me to come back, saying that I was destroying the family. A week later, Ivy called, crying, saying that I was the only one who understood her and that she needed my support. I told them all the same thing. I'm not coming back. 3 months later, they stopped calling. Work at the clinic was going great. Dr. Williams entrusted me with more responsibilities. I helped with simple procedures, learned how to give injections, even assisted during surgeries. My salary increased to $11 an hour, as promised. The best part of the job was that I felt useful. When I calmed a scared cat before sterilization, when I explained to the owners how to take care of the animal after surgery, when I saw the patient we had been treating for weeks recovering. In December, a small cat was brought to the clinic, a red, skinny cat with an eye infection. The owners could not pay for treatment and wanted to put him to sleep. We can cure him, I told Dr. Williams. I'll pay for the treatment, Scarlett. It will cost about $200. That's okay, I have savings. The treatment lasted a month. I would come to the clinic early to give the cat his medicine and stay after work to spend time with him. He gradually recovered, his eyes cleared up, and his weight increased. You need to name him, Carrie said. I named him Charlie, just because it seemed to fit him. When Charlie got better, I took him in. Mr. Chen didn't want to allow animals in the apartment at first, but when he saw how calm and clean Charlie was, he changed his mind. He's a good cat, he said. Charlie didn't catch mice. He liked to sleep on my bed and look out the window at the birds. But he was the perfect roommate. He demanded nothing but food, water, and warmth. He purred when I came home from work. He warmed my feet on cold evenings. For the first time in my life, I felt needed by someone not because I was forced to, but because I wanted to. After 6 months of liver treatment, I came to Dr. Patel for another checkup. The results were excellent. All the indicators came back to normal, he said. You did a great job. We'll leave the maintenance therapy for another 3 months, then switch to preventive examinations every 6 months. I was sitting in the hospital corridor, waiting for the referral for the last tests, when a young man in a white coat sat down next to me. He looked tired and was holding a folder with the results. Tough day? I asked him. He looked up and smiled. A pleasant face, brown eyes behind thin glasses. Are you here for work or as a patient? Patient. I'm here for a follow-up visit after hepatitis treatment. I see. I'm Marcus Brown, gastroenterologist. He held out his hand. Scarlett Campbell. I work at a veterinary clinic. Interesting. I've always wanted to get a dog, but I'm running out of time. We talked for a few more minutes, about work, about animals, about how difficult it is to find a balance between career and personal life. It turned out that he also has a chronic illness, Crohn's disease, which he controls with diet and medication. It's strange, he said. Usually doctors don't like to talk about their own illnesses, but for some reason it's easy with you. Maybe because we both know what it's like to live with a chronic illness. Maybe. When I was called for tests, he said, maybe we can have coffee sometime? Tell me about your work with animals. I gave him my phone number. He called 3 days later and invited me to a small cafe near the hospital. We talked for 2 hours about medicine, animals, books, and travels we'd like to take. You have a special attitude to life, he said when we said goodbye. It seems like you know exactly what you want. I didn't always know, I replied. For a long time I lived the way others wanted me to. But now I'm trying to live for myself. It's the hardest and most important thing you can do. We started meeting once a week, not a date, just a friendly meeting between two people who were interested in each other. Sometimes we went to the movies, sometimes we just walked in the park. Marcus told me about difficult cases in the hospital, and I told him about funny moments in the clinic. A month later, he invited me to lunch at a restaurant. This is already like a date, I said. What if it is? He smiled. Then let's call it a date. We took our time. We both understood the value of trust, which is built gradually. They both knew that real relationships are not only about emotions, but also about understanding, respect, and shared values. A year after I moved out of my parents' house, I was sitting in my apartment on a Friday night and looking around. Charlie was sleeping on the windowsill. There was a vase of flowers on the table that I had bought for nothing. On the wall was a photo from the clinic, me with Dr. Williams and Carrie by the Christmas tree. On the shelf were books on veterinary medicine that I read in my free time, dreaming of going on to study further one day. Every single thing in this apartment was chosen by me. Every decision was made by me. For the first time in my life, I lived for myself. The phone rang, breaking the silence. Mom appeared on the screen. I looked at the phone, and it kept ringing. I knew what was coming. More accusations, demands to come back, attempts to make me feel guilty. Ivy must be feeling bad again, or my parents need help with the move. Or they have decided that I've had enough of fooling around, and it's time to return to my family. The call stopped. A minute later, it started again. I reached out and turned off the phone. Charlie woke up from the sound and looked at me with sleepy eyes. It's time for dinner, boy, I said, getting up. He jumped off the windowsill and followed me into the kitchen, purring. I opened a can of his favorite food and poured it into a bowl. Charlie began to eat happily. I looked at him and smiled. I have a home. I have a job that I love. I have a friend who respects my boundaries and understands my values. I have a cat that I rescued and now makes my days better. And I have a choice to take calls from people who want to use me or to live my own life. I choose life. The phone rang again. This time I didn't even look at the screen.